No, one picked up. This one.
Jordan, we're live now. If you'd like to pick up the link and put it on your page.
Thanks.
And I'm going to start admitting people in. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give people just another 30 seconds or so to join us, and then we'll get started.
We may even want to go off camera when I'm scraping.
All right, it's 2:01. I'm going to go ahead and get started just so we respect everyone's time. Welcome to everyone that is on the call and everyone that's going to get on in the next few minutes. We are thrilled to have you join us for the third in our series of virtual events that we are hosting throughout this year to celebrate the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission's 25th anniversary. Our hope is that through these events, you will get to know more about us, the Friends, and our mission to support the Texas Historical Commission in its preservation efforts across the state. And hopefully you will choose to support us in these efforts. I wanted to especially welcome our board members and advisors and THC staff who are joining us today. And a special shout out to Lynn McCauley, the mother of our site manager, Brian McCauley. Thank you, Lynn, for joining us today. I did want to introduce our friends of the THC team, Katie Kukerbaum, who is our brains behind this the series of events. Reina Andrade, who is the invisible force behind the scenes, who keeps us doing what we need to do. And Hope Baron, who is our social media expert, who has been reaching out to you via Facebook at THC Friends and on Instagram and Twitter at friends_THC. If you're on social media, please do follow us on these platforms for information about future events. And speaking of future events, before I get started, I wanted to share that information with you as well. We have another Foodways event scheduled for May 8th. It's titled Hungry for Hot Sauce. It's all about the history of hot sauce in Texas. This event will be coming to you from Landmark Inn and Casa Navarro in partnership with our site staff there. On May 27th, we have a conversation with Houston Chronicle columnist and author Joe Hawley with his talk titled Harris Who? Intriguing Texans Who Have Slipped Out of History Books or Were Never There. That really sounds fun and interesting. And on June 12th, we have another Foodways discussion and demonstration from Ida Eisenhower's Kitchen in partnership with site staff at the Eisenhower Birthplace State Historic Site. And registration for these events is open on our website, www.thcfriends.org. So please do join us for these events as well. A few housekeeping items. We have a small list of people joining us so far, but I'm sure people are going to keep coming on. So if you would keep your microphones on mute through the presentation, we would really appreciate that. You can open them on, turn them on at the end when we have our Q&A session. I would also ask that you switch to your viewing option from gallery view to speaker view so you can see the demonstration clearly, because then you'll see the speaker on your full screen. And for those of you that are not sure how to do that, there's a little view button on the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. If you click on that, it'll give you the speaker view option. So please select that. That'll make this event really much more fun and easy to watch. And then we'll have our Q&A at the end. And you're welcome to put your question or comment or share a thought in the chat box, which we can share for you. Or when we go back to the Q&A, we'll go back to the gallery view. You can raise your hand, engage with the presenters. We'd love for that to happen as well. It is now my privilege to introduce today's event and our speakers. As many of you know, the Friends of the THC's motto is preserving the real places and real stories of Texas. Storytelling is key to the work of historic preservation, and our presenters this afternoon have combined their passion for their site and the work that they do and for their storytelling to bring you today's event. So I'll begin with introducing to you Eleanor Stoddart, who is the educator at San Felipe de Austin State Historic Site and holds a master's degree in anthropology from Memorial University of Newfoundland in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, so please excuse me for that. She has extensive experience as an archaeologist, leading excavations in both Canada and the United States. After moving to a museum setting in 2018, Eleanor is now responsible for planning, developing, and implementing a full range of interpretive and educational and outreach programs and events intended to promote the site's history, increase visitation, and encourage stakeholder participation. Over the last 3 years, Eleanor has developed and presented school and youth group tours and customized educational programs to over 5,000 field trip student visitors for a variety of grade levels. She lives in Katy with her 2 teenagers and a corgi. Brian McCauley is the site manager at San Felipe de Austin State Historic Site. He holds a BA in government and anthropology from the University of Texas at Austin and an MA in political science and sociology from Texas State University in San Marcos. Brian has worked in the museum field since 2000 with positions at the Texas Independence Trail region, the Fort Bend County History Association, and currently with the Texas Historical Commission. Since 2008, Brian has been part of the project team for planning the visitor experience at San Felipe de Austin, the headquarters of Stephen F. Austin's colony in Mexican Texas. The museum opened in April of 2018 and has been a hit with visitors from the region and beyond. Brian also serves as the distance manager of the Fannin Battleground State Historic Site. Brian is the father of 2 adult daughters, and he and his wife, Amanda, recently moved to the small hamlet of San Felipe after raising their family in West Fort Bend County. And I do want to share that it's been my privilege to be a partner in crime with Brian over the last 5 years now, almost, on the San Felipe de Austin Museum project, and I really have appreciated that time working with him. And again, I just want to reiterate for those of you who are joining us now, you are in for a special treat today. Today's event is a behind-the-scenes look at a part of the San Felipe de Austin site that is not open to the public yet, the Via de Austin. So again, make sure that you are viewing in speaker view so that you can see the demonstration well. And Brian, Eleanor, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today and sharing your site and your stories with us. And with that, it's over to you, Eleanor.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anjali. Now you can see behind me, I'm standing outside actually at our bake oven. And I lit the fire at 8 o'clock this morning, and it's been burning ever since then. So if you can look just carefully, I'm left with a bunch of embers, and I've actually got the oven to the right temperature. So in a couple minutes, while Brian is talking, I'm going to be scraping out all the embers and putting the door onto the bake oven. And that will hopefully give it a chance to even out the heat. Because right now, when you kind of, by the way, there is a historic way of figuring out how hot the oven is, but actually I'm cheating and I'm using a digital thermal gun, and that tells me exactly what temperature it is. But once I scrape out the ashes and put the door on, it'll give a chance for the heat to even out completely. And that way I won't have hot spots and cool spots. And hopefully my recipe will bake perfectly. If you haven't figured it out, we're actually making cookies today. It's a recipe called Tavern Biscuits. And I've already messed up. When I sent the recipe out to people, I said it was from 1828. The recipe is actually from 1824. So it's a little bit earlier than I let you know. So with that, if you're cooking along with me, please turn on your ovens and get your ingredients out because it's time to get going. Now I'm going to hand it over to Brian at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Eleanor. And Anjali and Katie, we're super excited to be part of the Friends celebration this year, your 25th anniversary. I'm going to share a few images here as we get going, just so that everybody can see some of what we've been working on related to the VIA. Let's see here. And while we're thanking people in the audience, it certainly would be remiss not to mention Michael Moore, our project historian, longtime project historian, and our contract construction manager who's been helping us with this new exhibit. Just conceptually, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with all of you what we're attempting to do with the VIA. The idea as we started planning for this experience, and for those of you who have never been to San Felipe de Austin, one of our great challenges was telling the story of a town that had effectively been lost to history. So the town was destroyed during the Texas Revolution in a military act by the Texians, who were trying to remove a supply chain in advance of Santa Anna's army when he's chasing Sam Houston across Texas. And so we were trying to come up with what are the best ways to help people understand what was here before. And we certainly imagined that if our fundraising went well enough, and if Anjali and her team, who were so vital to our efforts to raise money for this project, were able to achieve that, that one of the ways we would do that was by having an outdoor museum element where we do representative reconstructions of buildings. We certainly spent a lot of time archivally and archaeologically trying to learn as much as we could about the buildings that we wanted to share. And in that process, for the main exhibit, which just opened, as she noted, 3 years ago, we came up with a couple of ways to share that. And I'm going to show you at least one image here in the program momentarily from the main exhibit, the technical digital exhibit inside. But I also want to let you know we've tried in several different ways to make this compelling, to make it understandable to visitors. And as we were thinking about the outdoor exhibit, our project historian, Michael Moore, had a brilliant idea of using one specific lot that was very pivotal to the downtown district of the village, something that was very densely occupied occupied because it was a very important part of the town story. So I'm going to show you real quickly, as my slide there suggests. These are actually pictures I took just this morning, so I can prove to you that Eleanor had the fire lit early. I didn't get here at 8 this morning, so I came in a little later and went over and snapped a couple of shots so that you could see a little more expansive view of where she is. So there's the bake oven. The image there to the left shows pretty much what you're going to be seeing while she's talking to you here momentarily. And then the image to the right pulls back a little so that you can see a tavern hotel that's part of this story as well. Real quickly, as we think about the history of the project, I'm going to step back and focus on the hotel a little bit. But I want to let you know, we're getting questions all the time about when the exhibit's going to open and what this effort was going to look like once we were finished. And for a lot of people, it looks pretty finished right now. We've been very efficient in getting the buildings in place. We're still working on a lot of the interior content, the interpretation, and that sort of thing. And I'm sad to announce, so some of you may be aware, we suffered a fire. We had a fire in one of the buildings a couple of weeks ago. And so that's going to cost us a little time as we plan for a rebuild on that particular structure, which was a stand-in for a courthouse. So I mentioned that this lot, the town lot number was 566, was densely occupied, and the structures that we want to rebuild all touch on big themes and stories of the town. So we were looking at this courthouse, a school building, the hotel tavern that you see there in front of this image, a kitchen, a bake oven, a print shop, and a dwelling. And we just finished the principal construction on the dwelling. We still have some work to do on it. And then we'll be redoing the courthouse and hopefully opening the exhibit up later this fall. But thinking about the history of the story and why it was so important to us, I wanted to pull back to this image and give you a little sense of how this complex evolved. So a man named Joseph White was an alcalde, a mayor of the town of San Felipe de Austin, and had a vision to build a hotel, which he called the Farmers Hotel. He didn't get a chance to run the hotel very long. He opened it up right at the beginning of 1830, and his health was failing and was out of the hotel business, and unfortunately had died by the summer of 1830. And so the second generation of the hotel story is really one that fascinates us, where you had initially a three-headed business partnership who came to Texas and are trying to do some foodways, commercial foodways, essentially, we think. They ran a store, they're running the hotel boarding house, they're doing a number of things to try to make their economic situation as positive as they can. But part of their vision involves this idea of taking on commercial foodways. And one of the unique features of the tavern that we've reconstructed is a brick-lined cellar that we think they were responsible for, at least the brick lining portion of it. And we're pretty sure they were using it for cold storage. Certainly in some of the research that Michael's helped us with, we found evidence of a lot of food storage there, spirits, baking supplies, molasses, the kind of things you'd be using at that bake oven there. So it's a really important story for us to think about how this all evolves, and it touches some really wonderful personal stories that we can experience. So just to give you a sense of how this worked as a complex, you can see the hotel there that we've reconstructed, and behind it, that secondary building is the kitchen. And then the bake oven there remains in the foreground to the left, where Eleanor's going to be helping you cook from today. Part of the story of the business partnership that took this project on around 1830 involves an enslaved woman. Her name was Celia Allen. And we've done a lot of research to celebrate some of Celia's story. We're privileged to know quite a bit about it, much of it from family folklore. She has a number of descendants that are still active in the area. And certainly we've done a lot of our own research. Michael published a fascinating piece about her freedom, which is one of the stories that we tell, which she was able to attain in 1832. So after the partnership had taken on the commercial foodways and were running the tavern building and occupying that as a boarding house, two of the partners begin to have conflict with each other. And a lot of that conflict centers around Celia and the idea of freeing her and her children, which ultimately is done by a partner named John Allen. And that's how we believe Celia was compelled to take his last name to reflect the honor of him helping her navigate a path to freedom. Her legal status was challenged for a while. The other business partner, who died in an unusual pit saw frame accident — we're actually replicating the pit saw as part of this story too. But after his death, the probate of his estate continued to challenge Celia's legal status. From the perspective of, there was a belief that Mr. Allen owed money for Celia when she was enslaved. And so the legal system was sort of churning through whether she could be legally freed or not. And this subjected her to a lot of unique legal journeys for a freed African-American woman in colonial Texas. At one point, William Travis actually served as her attorney. And we're lucky to have as a primary resource a diary that Travis kept, in which he notes taking on her legal case in 1833. Anyway, so we're really excited to be able to use these structures to tell that story. We think that all three of the buildings you see there would have had a specific connection to Celia, and she was an assistant at the bake oven. One of the partners actually constructed the oven and was trained as a baker. He was the one that didn't want to free her, who had the wonderfully, I always think of it as kind of a villainous name, sadly, the name of Laughlin McLaughlin. And so Celia touches this footprint throughout all the structures we're putting together that you can see there in that image. And we're really excited to be able to bring her story to light when we open the Via. I also want to share with you just briefly, we use her story in a digital mural piece. So I mentioned we were trying to come up with ways to show people what the town might have looked like. And one of the principal elements of the permanent exhibit here is a large touchscreen digital mural. And one of the icons in that mural you see here in front of you now is part of the bake oven story that talks about Celia and her legal journey to manumission. She did not live long enough. She died during the Republic of Texas to be photographed, but we did an exhibit recently of photographs of people who had settled in Austin's colony before independence. And these are two of her sons who were also freed in the same act that she gained her freedom. There were 4 children at the time, I believe, all of whom were also given their freedom in 1832. And these are two of her sons photographed much later in life, George and Yarborough, who went by the name Sam. So that's a really exciting way for us to help share some of these stories. And around the time we opened, the mayor of town, who's also a descendant of Celia's, mayor of San Felipe here, Mr. Bobby Byers, was featured in Texas Highways Magazine, as you can see there. And we're particularly excited that someone over at Texas Country Reporter was aware of this story, and they're coming out next week to film a segment. So if you're interested in that program, keep an eye on their website. They're going to be doing a little piece about San Felipe and about Mayor Byers' lineage here. So all very exciting stories for us to be able to share. I wanted to show one image and kind of come clean on what we think we know and what we don't necessarily know. We've been looking, as I mentioned earlier, for archaeological evidence of some of the structures that we're working through. And while we have found what amounts to some fairly fleeting evidence of many of the structures, the most significant footprint that we've recovered or investigated is the brick-lined basement to the hotel. And so you see here, this is from the summer of 2014, which was, I believe, the first time we were confident that we had exposed a portion of the cellar. We have not yet found clear evidence of the bake oven, but it has some wonderful stories that we want to associate. And I guess I should clarify, the new construction outdoors is right here next to our modern building. And of course, we specifically did that to avoid the archaeological footprint, which is across the main road here in San Felipe, Farm to Market 1458, which is where we still will be doing archaeology in the years to come and continue to look for the actual footprint of the bake oven, see if we can learn anything new there. The bake oven not only has a wonderful connection to Celia and her family story. Part of the family folklore about her is that she did not evacuate the town when it was burned with all the other residents, but instead stayed behind in an effort to protect the bake oven that was her livelihood. And interestingly enough, when Santa Anna's army is here briefly trying to cross the Brazos River and in a skirmish with Texians on the other side of the river, he uses the bake oven, as we understand it, as a defensive position, as an embrasure for his cannon. And so that's an interesting story for us if we could navigate it archaeologically as well. So with that, I'm going to pull back out of picture mode and send this back out for what you really signed up for today and let Eleanor do some exciting cooking for you. So make plans to come see us and enjoy the new Via to Austin when it opens up this fall or certainly close to the end of the year. Keep an eye on our Facebook page or our website. Give us a call if you're going to be in the area. We'll let you know the status. But we're super excited to share this preview and very excited to help the Friends celebrate their 25th anniversary. Here you go, Eleanor.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, so today we are making tavern biscuits, and it is actually a recipe, like I said, from 1824 from a cookbook called The Virginia Housewife. So this is a modern reproduction of it. The good news about modern times is that a lot of these historic cookbooks have been reprinted, and they're very easy to find. As well, the internet is a great source. A lot of libraries have scanned their historical cookbook collection, so there's a wealth of information out there. However, as I'm finding out, sometimes the recipes require a little bit of translation. So I'll read you what the original recipe said. It said, to 1 pound of flour, add ½ pound of sugar, ½ pound of butter, some mace and nutmeg powdered, and a glass of brandy or wine. Wet it with milk, and when well kneaded, roll it thin, cut it in shapes, and bake it quickly. So if you notice, there's kind of some steps left out. And when it says things like bake it quickly, they're actually referring to the temperature of the oven. And in this case, a quick oven is one that's about 400 degrees. So as you can see, I've got the door on. So hopefully things are evening out there. And I've got all my ingredients laid out on the table. I've been experimenting with this recipe quite a bit. I've done it in the bake oven before. I've done it at home. There's different ways you can do this. Basically, you're going to end up with kind of a light nutmeg spiced sugar cookie at the end of all of this. So it's called a tavern biscuit, but this is more the English sense of the word for biscuit, right? This is what my parents, who are from Scotland, would definitely call. They would fit right in with all of this. This is what they would call cookies. So if you're going to start with me, I've got my butter all ready to go in my bowl, and ooh, my goodness, it definitely is room temperature. Okay, it's been sitting out for a little bit, so it's nice and soft. So basically, I've got my butter in my bowl. I'm going to add my cup of sugar, and then basically all you're going to do is mix it until it is well blended. So this will actually go very quickly. You notice how the recipe said a glass of wine? Okay, we're not going to get that crazy. I'm just going to put in a couple of tablespoons or teaspoons. I've done this a couple of times, and it's a very sticky dough. So there's different ways that you can change it. You can add a little bit more flour, although that tends to toughen it up. You can mess around with your proportions of butter, but honestly, I think the way we've got it, it works fairly well. Okay, so I've got my butter all ready to go. Now I am going to add in my, okay, I didn't use brandy. I've actually got white wine. I've done this with red wine as well. It just kind of turns your cookies a little bit purple. So I'm going to add a little bit of the wine. I'm going to put in my nutmeg and my mace. So mace is actually just the outer coating of nutmeg. It's kind of this lacy outer coating that can be dried and used. In the past, when we've done this, I've actually grated whole nutmeg. But in this case, I've just got the powdered version of it because it takes a bit of work to grate your nutmeg for sure. It's a pretty tough nut or a pretty tough seed. Okay, so I've got that mixed in, and now I've got my 2 cups of flour. So check out all my cute little tinware that I'm using. And then you're, whoops, mixing it around. I have been practicing with different recipes. I've done cakes, I've done pies, I've done these cookies. We've actually done a lot of frozen pizzas. I know that's not historically accurate, but they do taste good. This bake oven makes excellent pizza. Okay, so I've got 1 of my cups of flour in, and now I'm gonna do the other one. I've been generous when I said a 1/4 cup of milk. Honestly, I don't think you need that much. So, you know, experiment, see how yours turns out and kind of adjust your quantity of milk accordingly. So I'm stirring it, things. See how this is? This is actually a pretty quick recipe. I deliberately tried to pick a recipe that we could do within the hour. Some of the cakes require a whole lot of beating of eggs, and it takes quite a while. So now my dough is fairly sticky, and it's going to get even stickier when I add a little bit of milk. So there's different ways you can handle the stickiness of this dough. It tells you to roll it out and cut out shapes. Honestly, what I've been doing is picking up about golf ball sized chunks. Okay, I'm going to put in a little bit of milk. Basically golf ball sized chunks and kind of rolling it into little balls and patting it out on the baking sheet. And that seems to work very well. These cookies will spread in the oven, so they're going to be a bit bigger than when you started. Okay, so honestly, we're doing pretty good here. Check it out. Okay, so there's my dough. So I'm going to wash my hands one more time. And then I'm going to start putting it out on my tray. Can you see what I'm doing okay? I think you can. I hope so. So I will move things out of the way. Basically, I've I can use my metal spoon for this. Okay, that's gonna be a gigantic cookie. Okay. But basically, you have to put them out or pat them out fairly thin. Now, I've got in my directions is that you can sandwich it between pieces of plastic wrap and roll it out. Or I have seen in one version of the recipe where basically you take the whole thing of dough and drop it all on your cookie sheet. And then it will just spread out. And then when it's warm after it's done baking, you cut it into squares. Now, I did that once at home and my son really liked it, mainly because all the pieces didn't break apart. And so he ended up with quite a large piece of cookie and he thought that was just great. So your mileage may vary. So here we are. So you're probably wondering, hey, Eleanor, how do you know what people had access to back in San Felipe? Well, we're pretty lucky. We've got quite a variety of ingredients and we can kind of tell what we had because we've got access to probate inventories. So we've got lists of some of the ingredients that people had when they died. So there's things like barrels of flour, there's cranberries, there's molasses, there's sugar. And one of the best things that we've got, we had flour in San Felipe. That makes a world of difference to what we can cook as replica cooking. A lot of places in Austin's colony didn't have access to flour. So the fact that we have barrels of flour from the baker, it's fantastic. Now, a lot of this flour would have been grown elsewhere and it would have been shipped down the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers to New Orleans and then sent over here to San Felipe. It sounds like the early settlers ate a lot of cornbread, and you actually see reports of people kind of complaining that they get fed up with all the cornbread and they're eating nothing but cornbread all the time. And boy, they just really wish that they could have a loaf of bread. I've made some cornbread. The people who are up at Barrington Plantation actually sent us some of their cornmeal last year. And so I got to experiment with that because it was the proper heritage blend and it was stone ground. So it was ground it was a lot coarser of a grind than you would normally find. And it turned out really well. So hopefully we can keep that going, and they can give us some more as time goes on. So I'm actually pretty much ready to put my stuff in the oven. I know that was ridiculously quickly, and I'm probably ahead of all of you if you're cooking at home. But let's take a look. I'm going to take off the door of the oven. It looks good. I've actually swabbed out all my ashes. Let's see if I can stick my hand in. Yeah. So there's different ways to test the temperature. There's a whole system of issues. You can stick your hand in and how many seconds you can leave it in for before it's too hot. Yeah, my digital heat gun is awesome. So I've got my tray of cookies. I'm going to put them in. I'm going to put my door back on. And now we're going to wait about 6 minutes. I think about 6 minutes, and we'll see how it goes. This is the worst part of the cooking because I can't tell what's going on in there. I sure hope that things are going well. It's like any other oven. If you open the door too many times, you're going to lose a lot of your heat. So I have to trust. I have no way of peeking, unfortunately, and that always makes me nervous. We have found with experience that it takes a while for this oven to heat up, right? It takes about 4 hours to really get it going at a nice temperature. And we found if you make a very large fire very quickly and then take it out, it cools off very quickly. So doing it slow and steady gives you more time to bake things. And when you think about how they would have been baking things in order, the stuff that needed high temperature would have been baked first. And then as the oven cooled off, you'd have the stuff that needed longer times or cooler times. Last year, we experimented when we rented a bake oven, and I made a lovely cake. We had a practice class where we invited people to come, and we were experimenting with different recipes, and I made a cake, and we actually forgot about it in the oven for far too long, I thought, but turns out the oven was cooling off, and it came out perfectly. So we tried it again the next day when we had a lot of volunteers here doing reenactments, and I made the exact same recipe, and I thought I had done absolutely everything the same. And it looked perfect on the outside, but in the evening when it came time to cut into the cake, I cut into it and it just oozed everywhere. So that was kind of one of more of my disasters. And I kind of learned that you never cut into a cake in front of the public. So you quietly do this. So I kind of threw a tea towel over it and took it away, and then it just magically disappeared. So that kind of stuff tends to happen. What else can I tell you about? Yeah. So as well, because we're interpreting a very tight time period, some of the ingredients we had access to are a little bit different as well. Some of our leavening agents were more limited in. This, unfortunately, the time of San Felipe de Austin, it's pre-baking soda and baking powder. So I don't have access to that as a leavening agent. So I'll be using a lot of eggs, a lot of yeast that I should be growing myself. And then also, there is something called emptins, which is kind of made from leftover hops. Basically it's another one of these yeasty type things. So I have not experimented with that one yet, but that's on the list to mess around with. We also, they also use something called pearl ash. And so that's literally made from ashes. And if you do it one way, you can end up with soap. If you use it another way, you end up with a leavening agent for your baking. So I think there's going to be some very interesting chemistry experiments going on over the next little while for sure. What else can I show you? So yes, I've got quite a variety of cookbooks that I bought for my own personal collection. And honestly, you can find these secondhand online for about $5 each. So it's not a very expensive way to gain your collection and experiment with things. And there's a lot of other tips. Yes?
There's a question while you're waiting. You mentioned that the flour came from New Orleans, you said?
Or it actually came from more in the Northeast. So because you can't really grow, like, wheat did not do so well around here. Your corn grew like crazy. It was a lot harder to grow a decent crop of wheat. So all of that would be shipped in.
What about the other ingredients, like spices and things like that? Where did those come from?
So pretty much everything came through New Orleans at some point or another. That was much more of a major port. And I know that in the 1820s, it was harder to get goods here in San Felipe, but by the 1830s, you could pretty much get anything you wanted as long as you could pay for it. So the supply chains were a whole lot better by the 1830s. It was a whole lot easier to get things. And so This is driving me crazy. Do you think I should take a look and just, I will. They're looking kind of pale. I think we can wait a little bit more.
Well, we'd love to hear more stories about the site and about the food as well, if you can share. I know there's a history of gourds, for example, at San Felipe. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Oh, well, yes. So we have a lot of items that are made from bottle gourds, a lot of kitchen implements and water bottles. So I actually took a class from the Texas Living History Association a year ago. They had a conference and they had a class in making water bottles, or basically water canteens from bottle gourds. And it's surprisingly simple. So you grow your cool bottle gourd, you pick the one that you like that's a nice shape, you scrape out the insides, and then we also did a series of small rocks and shook it up, and that kind of gets all your seeds and all the bitty stuff inside, all the membrane, whatever. And you pour that out, and then you coat the inside with beeswax, and then it makes a very good water bottle. However, you can, from what I understand, you can really tell if you've messed up and missed a piece or missed a part of the inside. Like if you haven't coated it, it tastes your water will taste extremely bitter. So it's always a wise thing to do a couple of rounds of beeswax as you're coating inside. And so actually in our kitchen, we've got a lot of cool like water dippers made out of gourds and other implements. So I'm going to have a really good time playing with all of this stuff and showing it off to visitors for sure. If you want another story about my experiments in baking, so last week I made a cake and cornbread. And so I gave it out to the other staff members, and Tony, who is our special events coordinator, took some home for her husband. And apparently her husband took what he thought was a cornbread, buttered it up, ate it, thought it was the best cornbread ever, and it was the cake. So he was a little confused, but he came in and complimented me and admitted that, yeah, he had the wrong item all along. But well.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, and yes, volunteer opportunities. We're always looking for volunteers to help us out. And that is a good point that my site manager just made. Yes, if you think that you would like to come here and help us out, we would love to have you. I know a lot of people take a look at this via development and think, oh, I don't really want to dress up in 1830s outfit, but we do have a need for people who just want to dress normally like I am right now. I think, when visitors come, they'll need a bit of an orientation and some encouragement to actually go into the buildings to explore. So we'll need people to be here to kind of help facilitate that experience. So we do have volunteer opportunities. Please email us or give us a call and we'll figure it out. It's been a strange year because of the pandemic, but we're starting to see more visitation and more visitors. So we definitely could use some help.
Thank you for that. And while you're waiting, I will also jump in and follow on what Brian mentioned about the fire at the site. For those of you that missed that, Brian mentioned the fact that we're completing the Via de Austin exhibit at the site, and there was a fire a week ago that impacted one portion of the exhibit, and so we are fundraising to reconstruct that exhibit. And if you'd like to support that, we would really appreciate that. And you can make a contribution online, again, at our website, www.thcfriends.org. Many of you have already supported that campaign that we have, and we really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop right there because I see Eleanor doing something.
All I did was turn the cookies around. They were starting to get a little bit well done on one edge, or at least one was. It was interesting. I've been looking at lists of items bakers would use. And I did notice that on one list, at least, it had a baker's rasp. So basically it's a giant file. So honestly, you could take the burnt stuff and just file it all off and make your baked goods look amazing. So I'm thinking we need one here, or this will save my bacon eventually when I'm doing more demonstrations. So yes, no, they're cooking up nicely. They're looking pretty good. And actually, sorry?
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask, can you speak a little bit to where the sugar came from?
Oh boy. So there was both molasses used as a sweetener and sugar. And so that would have come, from the Caribbean, I'm thinking, and it also would have come through New Orleans as well. We do actually have, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole idea of sugar cones, because the sugar would have come in cones. So you would be taking your raw sugar and putting it into a mold and letting it all drain out, all the molasses drain out, and you're left with kind of a pyramid of sugar. And we've actually managed to buy some of those. So we'll have that actually in the store part of the hotel as well. But I think people would be getting very creative with their sweeteners, and not everything was always available. So you'd be looking for your wild honey, you'd be using molasses, yes, whatever you could use. And I do know that a lot of people struggled when they first arrived, and they didn't have a lot of money to buy things.
That is fascinating. You talk about sugar cones, because where I come from in India, in North India, as I was growing up there, I saw sugar being sold in those cones in the markets over there. So to me, it's always, when you talk about food, it's really interesting to see how things are so similar across the world, especially back when.
So what did you use to snip bits off of your sugar? Did you have special nippers, or what did
I don't remember. I mean, I remember seeing that as a child. So in our customs too, we use sugar cones for because sugar is part of our when we pray, that's part of the offering too. So we use sugar cones even today, but those are like solid sugar cones. But I don't really remember how they used to cut pieces off. We also had spears. We had balls of sugar that was kind of like rock salt, but it was kind of looked like rock, but it was sugar, and it was in spears as well.
I've only seen the pyramids here. And I know one of my colleagues at the San Jacinto Battleground, Kate Johnson, was in the Peace Corps in Morocco. And she talked about how they would use sugar cones there. But she said they just used wrenches. You would just take a wrench and whack bits off when you needed it, which is a little bit less, it's not as genteel as our nice little nippers, but it's really hard. Those things are quite solid as well. It's hard to get a decent piece off, for sure. Okay, I'm gonna look one more time. Oh my, okay. Aha, success. Okay, so they actually turned out really well. Can you see? There we go. So I'm gonna let them cool. They're usually, when they first come out of the oven, they're very delicate or whatever, they'll crumble if you try and take them off the pan too soon. So I'm gonna let them kind of solidify a little bit, cool down. But hey, it worked. Now, do you have any questions? I don't know if anyone has questions for Brian, but he's here as well. And actually, we can share the microphone if he comes over a little bit.
And at this point, if everyone wants to go back into gallery view on your Zoom screens, that way everyone will be able to see each other. We don't have a whole lot of people, so I think it'll work really well, and we can have a conversation. So please feel free to move into gallery view using that top right-hand view button on your screen.
Yes, I definitely have more of the dough, so I'm just going to use it while the oven is hot.
I'm sure Eleanor's colleagues will be pleased that she's going to use the rest of that dough before the day is over and have some cookies to sample before it's all done.
See, there we go. Yeah, we can sit around and eat cookies.
Pretty good. Not to say they looked bad the last time we did this, but these look particularly good. I think you all were exposed to a very successful cooking outing today. We all got to sample the test run last week. I should mention, of course, when you put together an exhibit like this, one of our bigger plans would be to do some large-scale food waste programming, and hopefully at some point host historic meals and have people come out for some really immersive type experiences. And to Eleanor's point earlier about volunteering, we recognize that this is a tremendous new resource for us to interpret the stories of San Felipe de Austin. But in terms of how we use them, it's really going to be a wide range of offerings from at one end, self-guided experiences to maybe media supported experiences. And then at some points, we'll have very immersive living history kind of events where people will be in costume like she noted. But we can make use of all sorts of skills, and we'll be doing workshops to teach people how to work at our oven. And particularly excited, I'll be traveling with our project historian again next month to pick up a printing press. It's going to be a core part of one aspect of the VIA. So we're really excited to bring that story to bear. So next time, Anjali, if you need a workshop on printing, give us until the summer or fall. We'll get that ready to go too.
Will do.
I can't tell from here. Do you have any questions?
I am checking the chat box. Katie has an interesting question. Did you, what would Celia have done with everything that she baked?
So, Celia had a pretty long time of working with the oven over a number of years. We think as part of the effort of the commercial foodways that her owners initially before her freedom were engaging in, they were trying to sell baked products to the other taverns, right? So most of the hotels and taverns here were really boarding houses. They were a place where people were getting meals. San Felipe was a town full of a lot of single men who didn't particularly like to cook for themselves or to make the time to cook for themselves. And so they would be on maybe a monthly contract or subscription to come and eat. So it seems like part of the vision of this larger style oven was to bake goods on a scale that would allow the business to sell them to the other taverns. And so we presume a lot of that's going on. Obviously, pioneer cooking and dining, especially if you're working in the food industry, is likely catch as catch can. You're cooking throughout the day for various projects. Oh, sorry. You're cooking throughout the day and then ostensibly eating when you have a minute, sitting down and eating whatever you've cooked for yourself or your family kind of in a quiet corner. But I think we're still navigating exactly what we think was happening on that larger commercial scale. But that's a great question, Katie, about how much impact was she having here, was the bake oven having on the broader community? I think we have a good sense of what the vision was. We're still navigating how successful it was in that regard, how much delivery was going on. Also some evidence that they were baking things once you get closer to war, sending off bread products and things to support the war effort for the military that's part of the migration ultimately to San Jacinto.
So when you say there's some evidence, what is that evidence?
Well, just accounts that we're looking at. So it has to do with the purchase by the government, people talking about how they're migrating things and moving it back and forth. So we've had more success, which is interesting for a site where we're doing a lot of archaeology. We've had more success archivally in terms of nailing down a lot of the story. And we're very fortunate that there's a significant archival record related to the town, both to the governmental actions that were taking place here, to the various, letters, probate, deed records, the kind of things that help us prop up some of our interpretive stories based on those nuggets. I'm going to make everybody jealous by having a bite of your cookie.
And I can't talk, right? It'll be passed over to me.
Brian, could you speak a little bit to what the plans are for ongoing archaeology at the site? I know you have some programming plans, so could you maybe share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we were super excited in planning for this facility that the Historical Commission agreed with our local assessment that this was a site that needed a staff archaeologist, that the resource is that important, and that the ongoing research we want to do was going to need that level of support. So we hired an archaeologist amongst our earliest staff, Dr. Sarah Chesney. And our vision right now is to do roughly 2 dig seasons a year. What a lot of people don't understand about archaeology is that 3 to 6 weeks in the field can generate 6 or more months of analysis and work, and sometimes far longer than that when you get into conservation of objects. So we're trying to do a couple of dig seasons a year. I would suggest to you, Anjali, there's way more archaeology left to be done than has been done so far. We've just scratched the surface at this point. And so much of that dense archaeology is across the street from where we built the museum, which is not happenstance. We deliberately tried to protect and insulate those resources as we plan for a facility like this. And as a result, I think there'll be excavations going on for years to come, and hopefully we'll continue to learn some unique things about the site. I don't want to get too macabre about it, but even in the aftermath of the fire, we've recognized how that gives us some interesting insights into things like the archaeological story of a town that was burned by fire. Obviously, this is an accident that we all wish we could have avoided and weren't dealing with the aftermath now, but certainly we've seen some really interesting things that help give us some insights into what we might expect archaeologically when we're looking for some of these buildings, what may have happened to objects that were subjected to fire before they were deposited. It's an interesting part of the process. But we hope, to your point, to include a lot of what we would consider public archaeology. When we're excavating, we like to do it in a way where visitors can get close to what's going on, depending on where that work is happening. And then when we're processing objects and trying to land on some interpretation, we want to make that as open an experience and something that guests can come and see when they're here as possible. I think it's interesting. A lot of our visitors, for whatever reason, are surprised when I tell them generally less than 10% of what's recovered is what I would call curatable, something I could put behind glass that would tell a story to you. Most things are too far gone, too broken, too incomplete to have that kind of impact. But I think you're going to see over the years, we're going to expand some of what we think is impactful as we learn more about stuff and can process it and contextualize it better. That will help us in the exhibit process too.
Thank you. One of my favorite things about working on the San Felipe de Austin project was to come to the site and hear all these different stories from Brian and from Michael Moore. So I was hoping, Michael, that you would come on and share a couple of those interesting stories. And granted, with the disclaimer that some of those stories might be our interpretation of what happened back in, in the 1820s and 1830s before the town was burnt down. But if you would, Michael, come on and maybe share a couple more stories.
I did not put her up to this, Michael.
I'm not sure I was expected to be here, but here I am.
You were not.
That's what you get for showing up, Michael.
Opportunity.
Well, it's a fascinating series of stories about the town, and I was very pleased to uncover a lot of them. As Eleanor was mentioning, the probate records were a particularly good resource, and this one block of property had the misfortune, perhaps, of the owners dying with some regularity. That several different owners died in 1830 and 32 and 36, and that gave a record of what they owned and what they were doing, and in an all credit economy, they all turned in receipts for what they were buying and what they were owed. And you can put together kind of their economic life, at least, from these little snippets of receipts in the probate records. And that's what proved to be kind of the breakthrough on understanding this block and other places within the town. So they give us the inventories, as Eleanor was mentioning, of what baking supplies they had and what were they selling in their tavern for alcohols, and who were they buying things from. And it's just you can begin to reconstruct their material world and their business life and make a stab kind of at the social experience that they had as a result of that.
Michael, can you add any nuance to Katie's question about scale coming out of the bake oven?
Well, certainly they were sending hardtack to the army before in the siege of Behar. So they were buying, wagon loads of pilot bread, as they called it, and putting in wagons and sending it to supply the army, keep them fed. It was, this is a commercial scale bakery and served the town and the surrounding areas. And one of the very few places you could get, wheat flour cakes and breads and that sort of thing.
And Michael, since we shared with folks that have joined us that this is the Via de Austin exhibit is not open yet, and it's a behind the scenes look. Is there anything, Brian, you or Michael would like to share, or Eleanor would like to share about what people should expect from this exhibit in terms of what they see and what kind of programming they might be able to enjoy and participate in? That would be great.
All right, Michael, I'm going to jump out there. Follow me up. So as I mentioned earlier, we're navigating what I think are going to be a really exciting and wide array of programming that this stage is going to allow us to do. And not to get too far down the rabbit hole, I think you can imagine all the sorts of hands-on activities and experiential learning things that you might have had experience with at other outdoor museums or places that do costumed or living history with representative structures or historic structures. Michael's had some really great vision for some exploratory activities that we might put into the landscape here that visitors can then come out and navigate on their own. But I also want to stress that a stage like this will let us do some really ambitious things. At some point, I hope you'll come here in the future and see perhaps some short historical theater vignettes done on the porch of the tavern. Will help welcome you to the story as you then go out and navigate and have that experience. And certainly eventually we'll land on a large scale living history event where we talk about the town and its history in that context. But I'm particularly excited about some of the smaller moments we'll be able to deliver. So we're looking at ways that we can use technology in the exhibit space so that you might come and find depth of story by using maybe an app on your cell phone or something else that'll help you navigate some of the content that's here. And I do imagine most days we'll try to have someone here helping you navigate that experience, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's one of our staff. And then on the big weekends, we'll have all kinds of crazy stuff going on. What I miss, Michael?
Well, I want to kind of pick up on the volunteer and the teaching angle. The school, the little dirt floored round log school structure, operated under an education system called Lancasterian, where the teacher taught the older kids who then taught the younger kids. And their motto in Latin, cui docet discit, he who teaches learns. It really points the way of how learning retention happens. And so we want to have volunteers teaching older kids who teach younger kids as a way of trying to learn by teaching. And so it's a real volunteer focused project, one with a real sense of exploration and learning and teaching. And so we're actively seeking volunteers, as Eleanor said, some in historic costumes, some in not, who want to learn and then use that learning to teach.
Thank you. It's 2:55. You're almost at the close of the event. So Eleanor, I wanted to circle back to you and have you show us the finished cookies before you all finish them up, and then we'll just say goodbye.
Okay. Oh. Actually, that was good timing. I have a couple that are a little bit overdone, but at least the vast majority turned out okay. So
Nothing that needs a rasp. They're not that over.
Yeah.
so no, thank you very much for joining us for this. This has been a fun experimenting kind of day.
Well, unless anyone else on the call has any questions, please feel free to jump in and ask. Otherwise, we will wrap up. Bob, I think you had something.
Yes, I believe this site is a state historic site. Is that correct?
Yes,
That is correct.
So when I want to visit, that will definitely be there. This is a fascinating presentation. Thank you. I presume I can purchase admission on site, or do I need to go online and purchase in advance, or how?
You'd purchase your admission here.
Okay.
And right now with the pandemic, just so someone's aware, our operating hours are Wednesday through Sunday. So we're open 9 to 5, Wednesday through Sunday. We occasionally do, some out of hour programming, most of which right now is virtual. But yeah, you would purchase your ticket here. We do discounts for seniors, for veterans, for locals, for all that kind of stuff. So we look forward to having you out.
I'll be there.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else with any questions before we say goodbye to Brian and Eleanor and everybody at the site? And Jordan, who's been behind the scenes, but thank you, Jordan, for all your help getting this event going. And this has been phenomenal. Brian, as always, we so appreciate you and the team at San Felipe working with us on these fun events. And we'll certainly circle back with you on the printing press once you're ready. So we'll have another one.
When Anjali first pitched this, we were a little nervous about bringing the internet to the VIA, but Jordan was a big key to helping get us plugged in and make this all work. We wish you the best for the Friends through the rest of your anniversary and your celebrations, Anjali, and always a pleasure to work with you guys.
Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you will register for future events and join us then. Take care.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bye-bye.